Welcome to the Daybreak with Jeff Slakey podcast. I'm so happy you found us. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this with your circle of influence. It's a collection of the interviews, news, and conversation during Daybreak with Jeff Slakey on I-501 News Radio, KMAS, weekdays from 6 to 9. Well, good morning to you. It's Thursday here, the 20th of August. I'm Jeff Slakey along with Spencer Hughes. Good morning, Spence. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing all right. I'm glad I'm inside, not outside. It's raining pretty good out there right now.
Yes, it is quite a change in the weather out there today, especially since, from the weekend to now, we were flirting with 100 degrees, things like that. Today on this show, local news and conversation. U.S. Congressman Derek Kilmer, who represents the 6th District in the state here, is on today. Also, Jeff Niten, Shelton City Manager, talks about city business during the Focus on Shelton, presented by our Community Credit Union.
And since our report yesterday, Mason County Public Health was notified of one additional Mason County resident testing positive for COVID-19, bringing the total to 291 positive cases in Mason County. Mason County Public Health continuing contact interviews. When a positive case completes their isolation period and is released by local public health, they can return to work and normal activities.
Well, we talked about it yesterday, but we got the official press release from the city yesterday afternoon. After 6 years of dedicated service to the Shelton Police Department, Chief Moody announcing his retirement, intending to retire in January, allowing time for transition. Joined the police department in 2014. He was in California for 26 years. He's got then 33 years or so of law enforcement experience. He has done it all. A DARE officer, school resource officer, K-9 handler, SWAT member, chief here, also mobile field force member. He's a great guy to talk with and always a good smile on his face when we see him either walking the streets in that community policing model he's really been adopting here in Shelton, or just his time on the air with us. He has been a real nice and fun guy to talk with. It's going to take a while to find someone to replace him. The recruitment process is going to begin soon, and this could take months.
Yeah, I can imagine. Very approachable guy, too. I love that he just walks the streets of Shelton, and you can just walk past him. He'll stop and talk to you and see what's going on with you. Washington has lost a giant. Those words are from the state Senate Republican leader on the passing of former U.S. Senator Slade Gorton. Tracy Ellis has more.
Senator Mark Schessler of Ritzville says Gordon exemplified the very best in politics.
When it was time to work for the common good, he did work with folks of all political persuasions. And that's why I think some people thought of him as ultra-conservative, while others thought of him as a moderate, because he brought people together for some really big deals.
Schessler says Gordon served as a state representative, House Republican leader, state attorney general, and U.S. senator.
Time and again, I run into people that got their start in business and public policy working for Slade in some capacity. He always encouraged good young people to move up and out and go on to other things. It's an incredible number of lives he touched.
He says Gordon brought a practical vision to everything he approached, something that is sadly missing from many of our political debates today. I'm Tracy Ellis.
Well, Governor Inslee issuing a statewide emergency proclamation because of multiple wildfires in the Olympic Peninsula, central and eastern Washington. Inslee said yesterday wildfires are threatening the safety and livelihoods of Washingtonians and that COVID-19 has put additional strain on resources because some of the support they usually have limited because of international restrictions on movement. A lot of times we'll get firefighting crews from all around the world to come up and help us out, and we in turn head out often to help other countries in fire suppression as well. The National Interagency Fire Center said Wednesday 17 large wildfires currently burning in Washington and Oregon. Proclamation makes the National Guard available in response to a request from the state's Department of Natural Resources.
The Thurston County Public Health and Social Services Department confirmed there is a toxic blue-green algae bloom in Lacey's Long Lake, making it unsafe for swimmers and pets. The most recent sample detected microcystin algae toxin levels at 14 micrograms per liter of water, above the state standard of 8 micrograms per liter for recreational water use. In response to these findings, the city of Lacey will keep the beach and swimming area of Long Lake closed until the Thurston County Health Department can confirm microcystin toxicity levels are below 8 micrograms. Long Lake Park remains open to the public.
Well, just another reminder, as we are less than 2 weeks away from the start of school in the Shelton School District, on our website and Facebook and YouTube, we have a detailed, long conversation with Dr. Apostle and Kelly Neely from the district talking about the school year. Some of the topics that we discuss is student access and equity, teacher mental health, a typical day, and meals. Lots of questions as the school starts in, as I said, less than 2 weeks now. There was a school board meeting this week, and we'll talk with Dr. Apostle tomorrow on the air about the things that were discussed, including the budget and some pretty tough numbers that look in the budget. And it's not just Shelton, though. It's all across the county, the state, and the country as we are getting ready for the start of the school year. The other thing to note is that Mason Transit resuming some of its service on Saturday, not the same levels prior to COVID. The routes will be available to Camilchi and Olympia, along with routes in Shelton and Belfair. So check out masontransit.org for those updated pieces of information there. Mariners win here, and let's see here. Austin Nola hit a 3-run home run and had 4 ribbies. Taiwan Walker overcame some issues early to throw 7 strong innings, and the Mariners beat the Dodgers 6-4, snapping the Dodgers' 7-game winning streak. They'll play again today at 3 with a 4:10 first pitch right here on your home for the Mariners. And a big thanks to our Super Sports sponsors helping to get the Mariners on the air this year: Ascend Roofing, Arch Mechanical, PUD3, iFiber Communications, and the Roof Doctor. U.S. Congressman Derek Kilmer from Washington 6th on the show today. Also, Jeff Niten from the city of Shelton during our Focus on Shelton, presented by our Community Credit Union. More Daybreak Show is coming up.
From the iFiber One News Radio studios, you're listening to Daybreak.
Well, good morning, everybody. Jeff Slakey and Spencer Hughes here on the Daybreak Show for our Focus on Shelton, presented by our Community Credit Union. City Manager Jeff Niten in studio. Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Very good. Good morning. Thank you.
Saw some news over this week about some potential acquisitions of some properties in Shelton and some cleanup efforts. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, we've been talking with Simpson Lumber Company for a little over a year and a half about potential acquisition of some property and cleaning up some of the property that they own on the uphill side from our yacht club.
Okay.
And that started, cleanup of those properties started this morning at 7 o'clock. It's something we're really excited about.
And so the stuff that is being cleaned up, are those homeless encampments up there, or is this something different?
There were a few people living up there. It's difficult to see from the top or from the bottom, to be honest with you. There's a little canyon, a little fold in the ground about halfway down, and there was an area down there that had several tents and several encampments that people were staying in that vicinity. And when the leaves fall in November, which is when we really started to hear about it, October and November, you can see some of those things from the road, and that's an entry feature for our city and something we take a lot of pride in. So we wanted to make sure we got that taken care of as soon as we could.
So this was a known encampment, a known spot. It wasn't just as you guys start to prepare, this kind of came out of nowhere.
No, this was something that we knew about from last year, and I'm sure years previous. But last year is when I really started to hear concerns from our local residents about how that entrance to our town appeared. Sure. And we want to make sure those entrances are as pristine as possible.
Yeah, yeah. And then through town, there's some opportunities to clean up some areas.
There are, along with the property on the hillside that we just spoke about, there are the old rail line that runs basically from just immediately north of Neelan Park all the way out to 101. And this was an opportunity identified several years ago when citizens in the community participated in a visioning plan. So we wanted to get moving on that visioning plan to make sure that we honor the folks that put in a lot of work to determine what our downtown's going to look like.
Yeah, yeah. So what could this possibly look like? And are you guys taking ownership of this property? And how does that work?
So it could look like the one main thing that we have the idea for is a multimodal trail that goes from Neeland all the way out to 101. And I have talked to Danette at MTA several times, although it's been a while, but we've talked several times about potential for MTA to put a park and ride at the 101 railroad intersection. And that would be a terrific amenity for that area. We would take ownership, and we would have that with participation from our police department to make sure that we design that as safely as possible and maintain visibility.
Yeah.
We also had a donation from Sierra Pacific, one of our great partners here in town, for 2 of the bikes that I believe we talked about, and we can use those to patrol the trail area, and I think that would be a great amenity for the citizens here.
But that would be a real nice usage path. That would be a real nice trail.
It would. The regional amenities are something that can attract businesses here. It can attract new residents here. Those are the types of things that show pride in the community, especially if we keep up maintenance, which we fully intend to do, no doubt about it, and keep up patrols in those areas. That is a big pride piece. It could be for the community.
Yeah. And then just looking and thinking about the downtown core, I mean, that's a lot of extra green space available in a limited expansion. I know there's been a lot of talk over, not necessarily Shelton specific, but just the country broadly of more green space, better walkability for the residents in there.
Absolutely. It's the walkability, getting people out of their cars, especially, well, not over the weekend because it was too hot, but especially on days like today where it's supposed to be in the mid-80s. Get out, have fun, meet your neighbors. We're Shelton, and we need to show that.
Yeah, for sure. Wow, some good stuff coming out with work and partnerships here. Great partnerships, as always, throughout the city. Helps city business go. And then before too long, some looks into the budget is coming up.
Absolutely. We started working on the budget a little more than a month ago for 2021 and wrapping up 2020. But looking ahead for 2021 and doing our projections there, we have a good idea at the moment about what things will look like. However, we are paying attention to the sales tax numbers as in August, particularly because of the drop in the stimulus payments for our neighbors and friends that are having a difficult time right now. Those numbers, the August numbers, unfortunately, won't come out until the end of October. So we have developed a couple of contingency plans to make sure we meet the needs of the residents and the city itself, the organization, should the numbers change drastically in October.
When I think of the makeup of the city council, there are business owners, and there are, state workers. There are business owners. There's a whole gambit of folks. Are they able to share with you some different insights as you look to the budget and say, well, I understand, for example, Kevin, Mayor Dorsey owns Urocco, so I'm sure he's got a great pipeline into understanding what's going on with sales tax and stuff like that.
I get a great amount of insight from each of our council members. They're all involved as being on the council. They're all very much involved in the community, and they have their finger on the pulse of the community, which I appreciate. And we've gotten great insight from each and every one of them about what their priorities are. Council developed their strategic goals last year, and those goals will continue to see us through both this budget process and the overall pandemic. They're our guiding principles when we make decisions at the city.
The Focus on Shelton is presented by our community credit union. City Manager Jeff Niten in studio. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I appreciate it.
You're listening to Daybreak on iFiber One News Radio.
And good morning, everybody. Jeff Slakey and Spencer Hughes on the Daybreak Show. On the phone line, representing the 6th District of the great state of Washington, it's Congressman Derek Kilmer. Good morning, Derek.
Good morning. Good to be back with you.
Well, it's nice to talk with you. Nice to hear from you. There's a lot going on. As we head to your website, kilmer.house.gov, first thing right there, don't mess with the USPS, and this has been a real roller coaster ride following this story with the newly appointed Postmaster General, Louis DeJoy. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on what has happened, and it appears as though he may be reversing course on some of the decisions.
Well, I think it's important to say up front, our Postal Service really provides critical services. I've in the last week spoken with small business owners who depend on the Postal Service for supplies and to deliver their products to customers. As a consequence of some of these operational changes that the Postmaster General has made, they're seeing delays. I talked to a veteran in Grays Harbor County who said, I depend on the Postal Service for my prescriptions, and he was really scared that there would be a lapse in the coming days. I talked to a senior in Silverdale who said she'd only seen her mail delivered to her mailbox every 2 to 3 days recently. And so it's important to acknowledge just the vital role the Postal Service plays in terms of delivering essential packages and letters, whether it's medication or supplies, or, coming up here in November, ballots. And unfortunately, the new Postmaster General has proposed some changes, operational changes and organizational changes that would really undermine our hardworking postal workers. We're seeing proposed changes that would degrade delivery standards, that would slow the mail, and could potentially impair the rights of people to cast their votes in the upcoming November elections. And so that's really concerning. It's why I've sponsored a bill to try to unwind some of these changes. It's called the Delivering for America Act, and I'll be headed back to D.C. later this week to vote on that bill.
I see that he will be in front of the Senate on Friday and then in front of the House with some of your colleagues later in next week, Monday, I believe, next week. Do you think some of the actions that have already been taken, even if they're being reversed, are cat's already out of the bag for some of this, or will we be able to get back to a better footing? Because I saw this morning on the news, I think some 330,000 Vote Vets said, I think some 330,000 pieces of prescriptions go out to the vets every day. And I know there's a lot of talk about the vote, sanctity of the vote. But as you mentioned with those delays, do you think the reversal will get us back to where we were quickly, or is it too little, perhaps too late?
Well, it depends if this bill that we're voting on later this week passes into law. What the Postmaster General has said, I think in part because, quite frankly, he felt the heat from the American people pushing back against these changes, he said that he wouldn't move forward with further changes. The problem is, to your point, we've already seen some damage done. And so the bill that we're voting on later this week not only would prohibit the postmaster from implementing any further changes, but it would restore the level of service to what was in place before this pandemic. It would just maintain service standards, maintain the integrity of our mail-in elections, and also provide some funding for the Postal Service. As you can imagine, just like everybody else, the Postal Service has faced additional costs for things like personal protective equipment, and has seen a drop in revenues. So that's why this bill is so important. I would mention, you and I've talked previously about the HEROES Act that actually included some funding for the Postal Service. And I think it's worth acknowledging that the funding that was included in the HEROES Act, the funding that we'll be voting on later this week, this is not sort of some Democratic wish list. The dollar amount and where it goes was driven by the bipartisan board of governors of the Postal Service. And so that's why we've pushed for the funding and for the operational integrity that we're pushing for.
Not many things have a 91% approval rating in the country, but I'm pretty sure the post office is one of those entities. I saw also in the news that the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is you're a part of, had a chance to meet with Chief of Staff Meadows the other day in kind of continuing coronavirus talks. Was that right?
Well, so I am part of a group called the Bipartisan Working Group. I co-chair that group and also co-chair a group called the New Democrat Coalition. And so given all of the hats I was wearing, I stepped away from the Problem Solvers Caucus because it was just one too many sets of meetings. And because I co-chair the other bipartisan coalition, the Bipartisan Working Group, I have focused my attentions there. But I think it is important that there's discussions happening between Democrats and Republicans with an eye towards getting to another coronavirus package. Listen, we know, I talked to a group of teachers yesterday. We did a town hall with educators and educational employees. There's real concern about not just potential layoffs to school districts, but people want to make sure that they can be safe and that kids can continue to learn. I speak on a daily basis with people who've lost their job as a consequence of this, and they're really concerned about their ability to put food on the table, to pay their rent. And I don't think that the federal government should just ignore those concerns. And that's why 3 months ago the House passed the HEROES Act. It's why it's important for negotiation to keep moving forward in hopes of getting a bill that will help solve problems for the American people.
What is it like in the House when you have passed bills like that and they just sit in the Senate for so long, and it appears though maybe, at least in that form, it would never be brought up? What's that? I mean, you guys have worked hard. I know there's a lot of work, not only from you, but your staffers and the whole House that votes on these things, and then it goes to the Senate and nothing comes about. Well,
I look at my job as there's sort of two parts of my job. One, standing my ground when there's something that impacts the folks that I represent. No matter who I talk to in our region, Democrats or Republicans or independents, there's a sense that our political system is pretty broken right now. And so the very first significant legislation that passed this year was a big democracy reform bill that included campaign finance reform. And there's a bunch of components of that bill that I wrote. And it's disheartening to see that bill go nowhere in the Senate. But I think it's important to sort of put that stake in the ground that says, the folks that I represent want government to work better. And while reforming our campaign finance system may not be a priority for Mitch McConnell, it is a priority for the folks that I represent. The other part of my job is trying to find common ground when we can. And that can be hard. But, particularly in this COVID pandemic, we got to make sure we're taking care of people who need help. And, sometimes part of the way that happens is negotiation on the front end, and then you vote for a bill that, everybody holds hands and sings Kumbaya and votes for. Sometimes, as was the case with the HEROES Act, when negotiations have kind of stalled out, when the Senate has said, well, let's just take a wait and see approach, you're trying to some degree use the laws of physics, right? An object at rest tends to stay at rest. The House will occasionally vote on a bill to try to put the object into motion and to try to drive some forward progress with the knowledge that it may not pass in the exact form that it passed the House, but to try to bring people to the table to start solving problems for the folks we represent. And so those are those are sort of the two parts of the job. Listen, the Senate has not been exactly a legislative juggernaut. There's a whole bunch of things that really matter to the people I represent in terms of, we passed an infrastructure bill, and you and I have spoken previously about the importance of not just investing in roads and bridges, but things like broadband, school construction, affordable housing construction. Unfortunately, that has not moved in the Senate, but I think that's really important to jobs. We've talked about the DREAM Act to make sure that young immigrant kids are not living in fear of being deported. That passed the House with bipartisan support, has so far gone nowhere in the Senate, but that doesn't mean that's not an effort worth undertaking.
This week is the Democratic National Convention. Have you had a chance to see some of it? The unity was on display for the Democrats as they went state by state, to nominate Vice President Biden as the Democrat nominee for president. What are your thoughts on this virtual convention?
I'm I've only watched a little bit of it. I did get to see the, kind of the roll call of the states, which I actually thought was kind of cool, and made me think that maybe that's the way it should be done going forward, rather than people shouting in a convention hall. Listen, I think part of the strength of our country is the diversity of our country. That people come from all over the place. That they have different backgrounds, in different ethnicities, different different walks of life. And I think what's been interesting to watch, at least in the bits that I've seen, is you've really seen that on display at this convention. People from all over the place with different perspectives, just saying, it's not enough to just say, we got to get back to normal. Really the key is we got to build back better. We really have to make sure that there's a new normal where we're not leaving communities behind economically. That's why I'm in this job, right? I was an economic development guy who just felt like, too many of the communities in our region are getting passed over when it comes to economic opportunity. And that's not okay. I don't want our region's main export to be young people. And so I am really hopeful that as we look at not just getting back to normal, but building a new normal, that it's a new normal that includes everybody, that it's where there's economic opportunity no matter what zip code you live in. So that I think is a big theme as well. And we'll see what happens in the next 2.5 months.
Representing Washington's 6th District, it's U.S. Congressman Derek Kilmer. Good to have you on the phone this morning, and we'll check in as we move closer and through the months, all right?
All right, you take care.
Good to talk with you.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to today's Daybreak with Jeff Slakey podcast. Again, I'm so happy and honored you found us and chose to listen. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this with your circle of influence. It's a collection of some of the interviews, news, and conversation during Daybreak with Jeff Slakey on I-Fiber One News Radio KMAS, weekdays from 6 to 9. Thank you so much again, and talk with you next time.